Hey there, this is Dennis Anyone with Dennis Hensley. It's a podcast about making things up and making things happen. I love talking to creative people. And today, my guest is Stan Zimmerman. He's the author of the book, The Girls, From Golden to Gilmore. He writes about his career as a television writer, working on shows like The Golden Girls and Roseanne and The Gilmore Girls, and the ups and downs of all of it. He also writes about growing up, being gay, things to do with his family, things to do with his adventures in Hollywood and all the different celebrities he's had encounters with. It was a really fun conversation. So fun, in fact, that it is going to be a two-part episode. But before we get to part one, I want to remind you that this podcast, Dennis Anyone, is brought to you by me. I do it. I love it. I'm into it. But there are some expenses that come with doing it. And so if you like the show too and you want to support me, there are a few things you can do. You can go to DennisAnyone.net. You can click on my virtual tip jar and you can leave me a virtual tip. Or you can do a thing called Buy Me a Coffee. For the price of a cup of coffee, you can say, hey, thanks, I enjoyed the show. And I'll get a little inbox announcement that you bought me a coffee, and it's really cool. So check that out. And the other thing you could do is become a subscriber to DNR Studios. I'm part of a group of shows under the Derek and Romaine family, and for a monthly fee, you get my show early, and you get all these other great gay shows. So check that out at dnrstudios.com. All right, here now is the interview, part one of my conversation with Stan Zimmerman. Joining me now from Los Angeles, it's Stan Zimmerman. He's the author of the book, The Girls, From Golden to Gilmore. He's even got a T-shirt on plugging it. I love that you think of every angle. Welcome to the podcast.
I've learned from Bruce Valanche.
Right? I think we all have. I think that we all have. It's a recurring theme on this podcast. We've been trying to set this up for a while. I'm glad it's finally happening. I just finished reading your book. What an odyssey you've had through the world of television. As a television writer, you worked not only on Golden Girls and Gilmore Girls, but Roseanne and all of these other projects in between. And so I'm excited to talk to you. First of all, I noticed that you have these diary entries in your book. Have you always kept a diary?
I mean, not like Anne Frank as a child, but right. I did start, I think my last year of college or my sophomore year, our modern dance teacher, when there was such a thing as modern dance,
right?
They call it contemporary.
Sure.
But back then, it was modern dance, and she told us to start writing, keeping a journal, and then we would have to give them to her.
Wow.
So at the end of the school year, we gave them to her, and then she friggin' lost them. So somewhere in New York are journals of my stories of all my trials and travails of running around New York City. And then we did it again the senior year, and I don't know why I trusted her. But it got me in the habit of writing journals, and I loved it. And I still keep journals today. And it was very helpful when I went to start writing this book because I've never written a book before. I didn't know the form or anything. So when I knew that the theme was going to be about all the wonderful women I've worked with, and Roseanne, that I thought I'll just start by pulling all the journal entries from all the shows. And I couldn't believe, the hours on a sitcom, you're there till, 9 till 2 in the morning sometimes.
Right.
Still kept a lot of journal writing during those times. So I was able to go back and see how I felt at all those crazy moments.
I never kept a journal until the last few years. I started doing a gratitude list before I went to bed. And it sort of functions like a journal. If something big happens that day, you're going to include it, even if it's not like a great thing. And I've gone back and looked at them once in a while, and I find it like really like, oh, wow, I forgot how bad that felt, or I forgot there's things that I forget. What did you notice when you started looking at your journals? Did anything strike you as surprising?
First of all, did you write today? I finally get to talk to Stan again?
I'm going to write it. I do it at night. It's finally happening.
That'll be in there. The intensity I found a little surprising in that so many jobs we were just always praying and hoping and striving to stay on the job. And you kind of forget about that. You think, oh, you've had this job and that job, but there's the terror of going to work every day, especially when you think of season 1 of Golden Girls. There was so much pressure as the show went from this little show that probably nobody would watch to such a huge popular show. and then all the dynamics and the office politics that you have to maneuver on any job, but especially on high-profile jobs like Golden Girls. Roseanne was very high-profile as well.
Yeah, you don't always appreciate these things as they're unfolding because there's this white knuckle thing happening. I haven't worked in television nearly as much as you have, but I did have a job once on a show called Love Spring International with Jane Lynch, and I was one of the writers on that. But the deal didn't get finished until the end, so I didn't know I was going to get paid until the whole job was over. So I look back and I'm like, that was a great job. I really thought there was a chance that I would never get paid for anything. But you look back and you go, wow, I look at those episodes, they pop up sometimes, and I'm like, that was really cool. But when you're in it, it's a different thing. And boys, that comes across in your book.
Yeah, and luckily I really give it to my parents and my Midwestern upbringing that I took those moments and really it sunk in how lucky I was to be there and be on those sets and be with those actors. I never took it for granted. Yes, we were always working to keep the job, but I was always so grateful that I had a job because also I was so young and really one of the first of my group of friends that had a paying gig.
Yeah.
And a weekly gig so that I could buy my house, before other people my age were buying houses.
Well, a lot of the journal entries are like you're giving yourself a pep talk, like it's going to be okay. Just hang in there. Look for the good stuff. Like they're not sort of venting bitch sessions. They're sort of like, okay, hang in there. Like this. I don't know what's going to happen with this or that, or this is going on. But you were on the first season of the Golden Girls, so you didn't know that it was going to be the Golden Girls.
No, because, conventional wisdom back then was who would ever watch a show about four older characters?
Right.
It would never happen. So it was kind of this fringe thing. It was on Saturday night, but it was starring four legendary women, Estelle Getty in theater, but, not really in television. But it was really, magic in a bottle.
Now, had it started airing when you got that job on the first season, or it had not started airing at all?
No, it had gotten picked up.
Right.
So you don't go interviewing for it until the show is picked up. I think nowadays they get inklings and they start the meetings going, but back then they waited till the official pickup. So we were out pitching episodes of shows that we had gotten, went to Family Ties, and we did get an episode of Valerie, then became Valerie's Family.
Right.
And we decided to just sell the story and concentrate on the Golden Girls episode once we got that.
Yeah.
So what you first do is you just go in and you have to go into an office and watch the pilot. That's all they had was the pilot. And you sit in a little room and you watch it. And, of course, Jim and I, my writing partner, were like, oh, my God, this is fantastic. And just our head was buzzing with ideas. And then you go away and you come up with ideas. You come back in and you pitch a bunch of them, hoping that they'll buy one of them.
Right.
And then we knew there was going to be one or two freelance episodes given out that year. And otherwise, the staff of writers was going to write the rest of them.
Right.
And we got one of the only two that were given out. And the other one, they had to do like kind of a page one rewrite on. And ours became Rose's mother. And it was most of it was in there from, our drafts and our, once they gave us notes to, the first table read.
Well, you have some pictures in your book, and there's a picture of you with the Golden Girls, and you guys look so young.
We were babies.
Did they treat you that way? Are you looking for your mom? Were people commenting in the hallways? Like, did it just, or is it just something that struck me looking at that photo?
I think I didn't learn till later, and I'm glad I did not know this, but that Bea Arthur was not happy when she saw, particularly us, but all the writers were young-ish.
Yeah.
But we really looked like we were probably, in junior high or something. And I guess she went to the producers and were like, who are these people? Like, why are they writing for us? Why aren't you getting some contemporaries of mine to write? There's so many established writers in Hollywood. Pick one of the, the old cockers. And then she read our script and she's like, we're good.
We're okay.
We're okay. They get it.
I love it. I
love that she did that.
Yeah.
And I love that if you go back and you just Google or go on YouTube, almost every single interview that those ladies did, separate or together, they always comment on the writing and they acknowledge the writing. That's just not done on television shows. the actors talk about themselves or the people, the other co-stars.
Right.
Really put a spotlight on the writing staff was pretty cool.
Well, you write about the pitch session when you guys are trying to get at the gig, and my stomach was kind of clenched because it didn't go great, right? And then there was like this Hail Mary pass at the end, right?
Really, as I say in the book, I was in the door jam.
Yeah,
like,
you'd done your pitch to, was it?
We were walking out the
Thomas?
door. Whit Thomas and Terry Grossman and Kathy Spears.
Right. Okay. So the heavy hitters of the Golden Girls.
Yeah, 4 people, and they had all worked on Benson together, so not intimidating at all.
Right.
And they had done Soap and everything.
Right.
And we were done. We had our lists. You start with like these big paragraphs, then you get down to one-liners like, no,
don't like it, don't like it,
no.
Don't like it.
Like, okay, well, Valerie's family it is, or Valerie.
Right.
And I love Valerie Harper, so I was like, that's not terrible.
Right.
And we're at the door, and just something came over me, and I just turned around and said, what if Rose's mother came to visit? And there was a long pause, and they're like, and then we just started riffing, and they're like, sit back down. And we came back in the room and sat down, and we just started taking notes, and everyone's like spitballing, and then it's going good, but we still were like, is this happening? I think we got an episode. And we did, and we went home and wrote it lickety-split, and they liked it so much that they brought us on staff. But while we were writing it, we would go and see the tapings of the episode. So they started taping some. So that's how we got knowledge of what the characters sounded like. And but it still had not been on the air. So remember, audiences are coming, when it was filmed in front of a live audience.
Right.
They were coming not knowing anything.
Yeah.
And they would show the pilot, and of course everybody would scream, and then they would watch the show. By the time they filmed our first episode, audiences, the show had been on 1 or 2 times. So they kind of knew the characters a little bit. And then as the season progressed, people would be coming in, and they would already know the minute you cut to a single shot of Bea Arthur, like she's going to say something funny, she's going to give a look, she's going to do something. So the audience would just start laughing.
Well, I was going to ask you what you think the appeal of that show is. Why is it so enduring? Because this is my theory, just as a fan. You know these characters so well that when a situation happens, they're going to do something like this or say something like this. And then they say it, and it's more clever than you thought it would be, and it's better executed than you even thought it would be. But you also knew it would be something like that. And it's just so satisfying, right? Bea's going to do a look. Or Rose is going to say something like this. And then Bea's going to say that. It's like it's almost interactive in the way that you know that these characters behave around each other. Why do you think it's been so enduring?
But you didn't know that in the beginning.
No,
remember,
you didn't know.
It's the writing staff, and we're looking around going, off of the brilliant pilot that Susan Harris wrote and the great actors in those roles. And then this is the writing staff going, oh, wait, she's funny when she tells long stories. It's funny when she comments on this and that. So in one of our episodes, we have, her saying, this is how you tell a story, Rose. And she's like, diamond a door handle and all things like that.
Yeah.
So we started early on making fun of that, and that became a thing. It was much harder to watch the show for me years later because it felt like they were doing similar jokes, but they were just like softer or carbon.
Right, like a Xerox of a Xerox kind of.
Of a Xerox. And
yeah.
It's like, I had wished the show, what I loved about Roseanne was that it really was an evolving family and stories like real life.
Yeah.
And in Golden Girls, it was much more closed-ended, and they kind of, were at the same place.
Right. You could there was no sequence. You could interact.
Yes, that was done on purpose. It was called evergreen television back then, because then there was no such thing as streaming and, binging anything.
Right.
You only could watch it on television, so they wanted to be able to play it in syndication in different order.
Yeah.
So that, it played and still made sense.
I love that. You talk about learning or discovering that it's funny when Rue McLanahan as Blanche uses a word with an R at the end or something like that. And you started giving, how does that, give me an example of that.
That was just me and Jim going into the room and going, we don't know, how do we write a joke? We don't know how to write a joke. And so, but it's so funny because I come from acting and I would do her voice. And it's just the way she would say like cracka or like sucka. it just sounded funnier. So it was like, maybe that'll make the joke sell more if, we just put an ER at the end. And so then we just started, it helped us colorize her character. So if you look at our particular episodes, you'll see a lot of those ERs.
Lots of those ERs. One of the lessons that you talk about gaining from the Golden Girls in terms of as being a writer is that you leaned into her big character trait. I'm talking about Blanche. To write the episode about sexual harassment, because she's known as being the more vivacious sexual character, and then you kind of flipped it on its head and pitched this sexual harassment story. Was that initially? Were they immediately receptive to that idea? Was that an immediate like, oh yeah, that's interesting, go ahead and write it? Do you remember?
Well, that came about. Remember, we had only written on one other TV series before, so we didn't know. I didn't take any writing classes in college. There were no sitcom writing classes. They didn't talk about writing for television. Now they have TV writing classes. They actually have Golden Girl classes at some universities. But it really was Rue McLanahan coming up to us on set. And, of course, anytime any actor would walk up to you, you'd panic. And she just said, really, she came from theater, and she's like, challenge my character. And that made Jim and I go back to our room, our office, and go, okay, what could we give her? She loves sex. What situation could we put her in where the easy answer would be to have sex, but she says no? And then we came up with the story, and right away they were like, oh, this is really good. And they did talk to us about, they wanted to do some, real subjects, but don't make them like a facts of life, very special episode. They wanted it to just seem like it's a fabric of these characters. We weren't stopping, fun, silly show to do something serious. It was just there every day, which I love that thought. And because that was so successful, it really taught us, do that with every single character. Any show that we go on, what are their character traits? How can we challenge them? And that's how we came up with the lesbian kiss episode, because at the time, Roseanne was, very liberal, loved everybody and, hadn't gone off a rocker like she is now and hanging out with Carrie Lake or down at Mar-a-Lago. But what could she do that then would challenge her? Like, I thought I was very inclusive of people, and it was getting kissed by a woman, and that kind of reverberated through her life and her family's life.
Yeah, which I definitely want to get to Roseanne and talk more about that episode. But sticking with the Golden Girls for a bit, you write about each of the women, but the one you were closest to is Estelle Getty, and you had some very sweet stories about her. Talk about the moment early on when she kind of took you guys aside.
It was one of the first days on the set, and again, she was the least famous of them. And during the one summer when I first moved to LA, I went back to New York to write another spec script with Jim, because we had written an Alice spec script. Remember Linda Lavin show? Of
course. She sang the theme.
Yeah, it was great. But we felt like we needed another script. And so we decided to write a Love, Sydney, which was a Tony Randall show.
And he was sort of gay, but not really gay. Like, that's what I remember about it. Yeah.
He was gay. He had like a photograph of a man on his mantle.
Yeah.
That's how we knew he was gay. Who knows? It probably just came with the picture frame. But so I went back to New York for a few weeks to write it, and Jim had gotten tickets for this new show that just moved to Broadway from off-Broadway. It was a hit of the year, and I'm watching it, and out walks Estelle Getty in the third act, and her and Harvey together, and they were hysterical, not knowing that years later we would write first. So when she's walking up to us, I, of course, was, oh, my God, we love doing Torch Song, and she just was like, come here. And she's like 4 foot something.
Right.
And we follow her. I didn't know what she wanted us to follow her for, but we did. And she said, just so you know, your secret's safe with me. And, I know that you're one of us. And so I was like, Jewish? Like, is that a weird thing? And she's like, no, gay.
Right.
So she was not gay, but she was an ally from doing Torch Song trilogy all over the country and on Broadway. But people are shocked to learn that we had to keep that a secret of us being gay, even on such a progressive show as Golden Girls.
Right, which is sort of this iconic gay show looking back. But day to day, you guys were not out. How would that play out? Would people be talking about their wives and you'd be just like going, yeah, well, I went to the movies. Like, how did it play out day to day?
What did you do? Well, you're sitting around the table. You've been around the writer's table. You talk about everything.
Right.
Everything you eat, every bowel movement you had. Like, nothing is sacred. What did you do this weekend? Like, I couldn't say I went to Studio One dancing, or I met a guy, or, and it was reinforced to be quiet about it, because one time I love going to garage sales, and I was saying, oh my God, we went to this garage sale in Silver Lake where we lived, and I got all these somebody's old sweaters, and the whole writing staff was like, you got to go home and burn them. I'm like, why? And they said, well, obviously, Silver Lake, it was a gay man. He died of AIDS. You can't wear those sweaters.
Wow.
And it was, a time. So panicked, I went home. I didn't burn them, but I did put them in a garbage bag and put them out to the garbage that night. All those beautiful vintage sweaters gone.
Right.
So when you hear things like that,
you can take a hint.
Be quiet. Yeah. Don't talk about that, because what if people thought you were gay? And that because gay and AIDS were so synonymous then, would they treat us differently? So there was all that fear. There was fear anyway about being gay, but adding the whole AIDS crisis on top of that was a lot to shoulder, really.
Yeah. What would you say was your most quoted line from your episodes? Or the most memorable moment the fans talk to you about the most? Oh, there's Bea on a mug. I'm trying to read it, but I don't have my contacts in.
Oh, no, I will not have a nice day.
Yes.
So
that's a perfect coffee mug thing. It's like a grumpy coffee morning.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we wrote that line. I still had to pay for the goddamn coffee cup. Weirdly, so many of them, when Blanche, when they all have the flu, and she says, something about, how beautiful she looks, even though she's, sick. I haven't been in a position like that since I given birth. And what Blanche dog ears. I mean, so weird that all these lines that we wrote like in early drafts made it through. And that's very exciting to hear.
Yeah, it's a compliment.
Even in other meetings I just saw on TikTok, I think it's a good thing, but I do scroll through at 3 a.m.
Right.
But the Sure Jan line that we wrote for the Brady Bunch movies, like that has become this meme, and especially with the last president, it's used a lot lately.
Right.
So it's just something weird that we tossed off, and it's now become this iconic weird line.
I know, it's amazing what lives on, and very cool. You've also done like Golden Girls cruises and panels and stuff like that. What has it meant to you to be part of this enduring thing and meet these people that love it?
I will be going on the Golden Fans at Sea cruise in March of 2025 out of Fort Lauderdale, and I've done a bunch of those. And it's funny because a lot of people come up to me on the cruise and say, I hope you don't mind, but can I talk to you? And I tell them, you don't understand. It's not like I'm an actor and people know who I am. Like Rue and Betty and all those women, they always got approached and talked to about the show. As a writer, I mean, you're famous because you host Mismatched show. By the way, Match Game, I would run off that bus to watch Match Game. I'd get my Fritos and Hawaiian Punch, and
as a kid, that was your jam.
It was Charles Nelson Riley. It was like,
but you kind of ended up living a Match Game life in a way when you think of like cocktail parties and famous people, right?
I know. I want to think of what character I could be so I could be on your show.
Yeah, well, let's talk.
I got to talk to Joyce Bulifant the other day. I was like, oh my God, you don't understand like what you meant to me and where you were sitting on that little set.
In the dummy seat. That's what they called it. That's what Marsha Wallace said, that the fourth spot.
The Elaine Joyce.
The Elaine Joyce. There was always kind of like a blonde, pretty kind of, But
so anyway. I guess that would have been my seat,
Yeah, the best. But yeah, you're going on these cruises. And
cruises. So
it's the gift that keeps on giving.
It is, and it's so lovely. And I hear the most beautiful stories about how people shared this show, especially with a lot of like gay people and their grandmothers who are probably more right wing, and it was a way for them to connect. And I've just heard just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful stories. So I tell them, no, please, I want to know. It's so cool when you're writing it. You're not thinking how it's going to affect each generation. But I've seen it through the years when I go out in public and young people come up to me and start reciting the lines that I don't even remember.
Right.
I've just seen generation after generation, and now it's gotten bigger. I've seen not many lulls, but it's never been this popular. During COVID, I think it was like the number 3 show on Hulu.
Yeah, there's something very comforting about it. Their friendships, the love between them. You write in your book about somebody that you met that actually the people in their hospital room were singing it to them because they were undergoing surgery. The theme song.
Yes.
Yeah,
so
what a beautiful story.
I met her on the cruise, and she was saying that she had to go. She had cancer, and unfortunately, she has passed. But this was a few years ago, and her friends bought her the cruise, and they all wanted to spend time together celebrating the show. And she was going in for one of her many operations, and she had a Walkman thing, and she wanted to hear the theme song as she was going in before the anesthesia took over. So she had it on, ready to go, and the nurse had to come up to her and say, "I'm sorry, it's not sterilized. We can't allow you to wear that in there." So she was close to tears.
Right.
She had to take it off. She get wheeled in. She looks up before they put the anesthesia in, and all the nurses and doctors are surrounding her, and they start singing, "Thank you for being a friend."
Oh, my gosh. Beautiful. Right?
So beautiful. And so it's things like that you're touching people for many generations.
That's something I've noticed about pop culture. Like sometimes the making of things can be tense or ugly or whatever. And there could be gossip around it. I hear they didn't get along and Kim Cattrall's mad at Sarah Jessica Parker or whatever. But at a certain point, all you're left with is the thing itself and you still love it, right? And your book has there's politics and tension and all of that. But then it all falls away after a while and you're left with the actual thing. And
with love of it. Yeah. There were certain spots, not necessarily with Golden Girls, where I could have just leaned into and been bitchy and catty and mean-spirited. But first of all, that's not me. And what is it really going to do? And you still want people to walk away with loving the shows as much as I do. I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
Right.
I don't want to hurt people. I mean, there was maybe one actor that I could have written something about what the writing staff said about them in the room. But because they're still a friend, I didn't want to put that in there. I initially put it all in. I'm like, no.
Is this person still alive? I love a blind item. I'm intrigued. My ears are up. But
yes, they are. Yes, they are alive.
Oh, so it wasn't it wasn't one of the 4 leads. No.
It wasn't on that show.
Oh, different show, different actor.
I'll get to that.
All right. Well, writing rooms are places where things get said.
Yes, I'm sure you can narrow it down.
Ooh.
And when I see you in person, maybe I'll tell you.
We'll figure it out. You write in the book about this moment where Betty White would Estelle Getty would struggle with her lines sometimes, and Betty would sometimes comment on that to the audience, and in a way that at the time you found sort of hurtful, but looking back on it, you see it a little bit differently. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think as we get older, we see things from more angles.
Yeah, so because I was friends with Estelle off the set as well, I knew she was struggling with tape night. And she was traumatized, and she'd been very vocal about that, and she was in therapy multiple times a week to get over that. And the common thought in the writer's room was that if she would only just stay home and learn her lines, and she shouldn't be going out to parties or benefits, and I'm thinking, that's AIDS benefits. She's raising money.
Right.
But the problem was she had early onset dementia, and we didn't really know that much about it then. So she would flub a line, and not sometimes, pretty much 90% of the time, Betty would start making a joke about her and go up to leave the set and walk up to the stands where the audience
was.
Yeah. So I later learned Bea didn't like that because she's like, stay in character.
Right.
And I'm watching it and saying, why are you making fun of Estelle and her forgetting of lines? And I got really mad. And so for years, I'd go to parties and go, that bitch. And,
right.
She's more Sue-Ann Niven than she is, Rose Nyland. And it wasn't until years later when I started hearing other people or people that worked with her that I came with the thought, and like you said, maybe it's just maturing, that perhaps what she was doing was making a joke and taking attention to her. And then walking there, and people would look at her and let Estelle have her moment to collect herself and get ready to do the take again.
And also, like, caring for the audience and keeping an eye on the whole production. Yeah. Like, it could have been something that she was doing for the good of the whole, you know?
Yeah, I didn't get that while I was there.
Yeah.
And so I just held this thing like, why would you do that? And that's not very nice to do to her. And so, I mean, people can fall on either side of that,
sure,
how they want to see her. I think that's nice. One of the nice things about growing older is that you just see different sides of people.
Right.
You know, you don't really, you think you know it all when you're really young.
Right.
And maybe you don't. Maybe there's more to the picture.
Of course. Let's go back and talk about your upbringing, because there's things about it that I really, really related to. You got to get ballet shoes for something you were doing at camp.
I knew you were going to say that.
Well, I wasn't a dancer yet, but I loved that thing. And it was the thing of your mother bought them for you because you needed them, but you were to hide them from your father. And I've just related to that so much, because that wasn't the dynamic of, I didn't have ballet shoes, but if I did, they would have been hidden. That probably feels right.
And as great as that was of my mother, because she knew that he needed to see them on me on stage with people seeing it in its context.
Right.
But think what that does to a child, that you know that there's something wrong about going to buy ballet shoes for a boy, and then you know that your father's not going to approve.
Right.
As much as she protected me and was so wonderful, and you know, I think about her every day, and so grateful that she was my biggest supporter and best cheerleader. I just wish that parents, you know, can be supportive as much as my mother was. That my father, unfortunately, was not supportive. He did see me in the ballet slippers and saw everybody laugh at me, and saw everybody after the show run up to me,
right,
oh my God, you're great,
and laugh at you intentionally, like it was a funny bit. Yeah,
funny bit I did. And they'd go up to him and go, oh my God, your son's so talented. So he's like, oh, okay.
I guess it's all right.
I guess it's all right. But he was still so strict. He was like, you can only see one movie per weekend. I'm like, what did you think would happen if I saw two movies? Like, my head would explode. I would suddenly become gayer. I don't know.
You write this. You write, I'm sure my father blamed my mother for the way I turned out. I thank her. That's so, that resonates for me a lot. Like, I remember there was a room behind our house, like a separate place, and we called it the playroom. And I would dance. I would do choreography to Boogie Oogie Oogie by A Taste of Honey. And I just wrote this into a script. And I remember having choreography. I was like, okay, side, front, like I was into it. But if I had been caught doing that, it would have been like worse than masturbating. I really felt like it was my thing that I did that nobody could know about. Where do we learn that stuff? Like, it's so, but it's unmistakable like that. And you write about how, like, already there was shame attached to what you love to do. But you kept doing it.
I was doing West Side Story.
You were doing West Side Story. Oh, wow. Yeah. Okay. All right.
Cool. You know, that was a great
Lots
song.
Of leaps.
But you also had to slide.
Yeah.
So sliding on shag carpet, it really ruined the carpet.
Right.
And my parents did wonder what was happening up there as they're watching TV and going, what is he doing upstairs?
Right.
And, you know, I don't know if you remember the Carol Burnett show and the Ernie Flatt Dancers. That was my goal. I could just be an Ernie Flatt dancer. That would have been everything to me. Anything else happened in my life is crazy, but I feel like I really missed out that there are no Ernie Flatt dancers anymore.
I wanted to be a kid from Fame. And I looked on your IMDb. Did you write an episode of Fame?
It was in the book. I wrote the one with Janet Jackson.
Yes.
Dream Street.
Street. Catchy song. The song holds up. Very cute.
It was on her first album.
Yeah.
And it was technically her first video.
Yeah.
And Debbie Allen directed that episode. So I was lucky enough to walk into the Revolver and see my episode up there, that music video on there.
Amazing. Janet, you met your writing partner pretty young, right? And you guys did work together for years and years. How did you guys meet?
Still are.
You're still, like, that feels like a marriage, like even more intimate than in a marriage, because you're linked together financially and in the business? And like, how would you describe that what makes your partnership work and why it's endured?
I think we see similar enough, but not exactly the same, but
right.
really, really, really close. And we share many of the same values. We also made really smart decisions early on as far as like our company name, but how we were going to be billed. We decided early on that we would work 5 days a week, but not talk during the weekend, so that when we got together on Monday, it would be like fresh and exciting. Of course, as our career progressed, sometimes we did have to work on weekends.
Sure.
But really respected each other and, in each other's vision. And he came really from it from a journalistic point of view.
Right.
So, and I didn't read and I didn't think I could ever be a writer. I was more the imagination and the jokes and the characters.
Right.
Just from my acting. So we kind of melded. We brought those two artistries together and learned from each other.
But you broke in together as a team. You guys started out as a team when it was just a dream, right? You would watch sitcoms on a black and white TV and try to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, and then I didn't even know what teams were, but I knew I couldn't write alone.
Right.
And I knew there had to be somebody else out there, and then he popped into my life, and we made sure to laugh, and we just started writing, and people started responding, so we kept writing more, and then we got interest from L.A., so then we came out for a visit, and people encouraged us to move out here. I was sick of being poor in New York, came out here, and luckily within less than a year, I was here in June, by April the next year, we were on staff for a TV show.
Did you have any imposter syndrome around that? Like, oh, they're going to find out did you ever feel like, okay, the jig's going to be up? Or did you feel like, okay, we know what we're doing. We've got this.
We didn't know what we were doing, but I knew I had something. I knew
right.
I had something to offer. I knew I was always told I was clever and creative.
Right.
So I knew I could offer that. I felt like there were times, like even on Roseanne, like I don't feel like I'm like a funny joke writer.
Right.
And that was really evident on Roseanne because Roseanne and Tom Arnold would populate the staff with all their stand-up comedy friends, like Norm Macdonald and Pat Bullard and Laura Keitlinger. So all around us were people. Lois Bromfield, you probably remember.
Yeah,
her.
These names are very familiar, like Laura Keitlinger for sure.
Yeah. So they would open their mouth and just like the most hysterical things would come out, whereas Jim and I would craft a joke, that's how we do it together. And you can't craft a joke in a writer's room. We could in our own little satellite rooms,
right,
but not in a room full of, 20 other people.
Right. It was like being at the Laugh Factory just trying to throw out jokes, probably.
Yeah, you can't. So it would make me almost shrink a little bit, and I really didn't like that because I knew I had a lot to contribute, but I didn't think jokes were it.
Right.
Now I can see it's just you just pitch whatever's in your head.
Yeah.
People you after a while you've done it long enough, and if somebody hires you, it's because they're paying for your point of view. So say what you think, and then let it go.
Right.
Don't
when you
hold
were
on.
Early on at Roseanne, one of the producers that hired you said, "Don't expect any patting on the back. We don't do that here." And also you wrote about at Golden Girls that you wrote about this culture of fear, that everyone was always afraid. And I feel like that was chic at the time. Like that was the way show business was supposed to be, right? Like it just felt like it was almost a status symbol of how ruthless or fear-driven or whatever. Like it was cool to be that way. That was just the way it was. I think it's changing. But I was reading that going, oh, this doesn't have to be like this.
No, I think it's all pre-Me Too movement.
Right.
Honest, to connect it with that.
Yeah.
That men could be, and mostly they were straight white men, and they ran this town, in a very Les Moonves kind of way. The tougher you were, the harder you were, you roll over people. It was even...
Because there are 500 people out that door that want that job. You were always told that, right?
Yeah, so it was always told in movies, like when we started writing movies, we don't like you, you go away, we'll bring
You're
another
disposable.
writer. Doesn't matter. So that the rougher you are, the easier it is for you to like just bang doors down, stay in that room, and be really rough. And it's like, but that wasn't us. We were just sensitive gay boys,
right?
And we just brought that joy to it. But people just loved us in a room together because we were like this married couple. When we would pitch, Jim and I have this way of he would start a sentence, and then I would trail off, but he'd pick up my word and continue the sentence, and then it'd go back and forth like, it's like watching Challengers or, the movie.
Right.
It was just so exciting, and even though they wouldn't buy the pitch, they would just like, come back and pitch more to us, because I think it was so fascinating to see these two people connect on some weird cosmic level.
Now, I'm not a super expert in the way television works, but you write about like finally becoming showrunners. What was the first show you were showrunners on? Was it Rita Rocks, or was it before that?
I guess technically, yeah.
But it felt like there were a few times where it was your show, you were brought in, and then people were like, "Oh, we're going to bring in these other people."
Yes,
and I was like, "Fuck that! That's not right." I felt like it was unjust for you based on the work that you had done. Like it just felt wrong in terms of the hierarchy of it all.
You would think that having just Golden Girls and Roseanne on your credit was enough, but back then you really had to work your way up, and they wanted you, to pay for your dues and just be out there struggling, and maybe they didn't trust us on the show Rita Rocks. Lifetime. The head of Lifetime did not trust us to run a show about a married couple with kids because they saw two gay guys without kids.
Right. I thought when I read that, I'm like, if they were straight, they probably would be the showrunners.
Of course we would.
God damn it.
They said that. I mean, they said that to our line producers, and then we were told that. I wanted to sue because I felt that was illegal, but there weren't things in place back then to sue over that. I think now we would could make some money, but it's just what the business was, and it's too bad because we ended up becoming the showrunners on the show anyway by season 2, but we went through hell before that. I mean, it was nasty, drag out, ugly, and just having to rise above it and just thinking because we made a really good pilot, and it wasn't until the show got picked up that they said, you can't run the show that you just made the pilot of, and we don't want you to change anything on the pilot, but we don't think you run it day to day.
Yeah,
it made no sense.
I wanted to throw the book across the room, but I was reading it on a laptop, so I couldn't. But I just felt the injustice of that. It was just like, those fuckers. I haven't had a ton of experience in TV, and I've had some great experiences, but I've also had some kind of traumatizing ones. And reading your book, there's a lot of them. And I was like, I wanted to ask you, when was it the best? When was it like creatively fulfilling, a functional environment? Like when were you like, that's the gold standard?
Never.
God damn it. I had a feeling you would say that. And it's heartbreaking to me.
I know. I don't want people to be...
No, but I think you're telling the truth.
Yeah. I think the only one job we had that was the best was really the Brady Bunch movies.
Yeah.
First of all, when you're coming in rewriting people, you're the savior. So you're able to look at it from kind of, you haven't been in the weeds of it.
Right.
So, and they're very excited. So if you can solve anything, they're thrilled. And so we were just for 2 weeks on the first Brady Bunch movie, just 2 weeks.
You were brought in, the script was already underway. Everything was,
they were casting it.
Yeah, you were brought in to polish and punch up and stuff.
That's all. So we couldn't change any sets. Everything had been, scouted and planned, and they were ready to go. So Betty Thomas, the great director and wonderful human being, just said,
I could tell you guys really vibed. Like she comes really across great in the book.
Right.
Yeah.
You can rewrite anything within that scene, but if it's the scene's in their bedroom, it has to be in their bedroom.
Right.
We're like, okay. And I'm like, really? Go to town? She's like, go to town. So we went off and we just got insane and crazy and came up with the weirdest stuff. And she kept laughing and falling on the floor. And she's like, more. So she could take this scene and then take this scene. And then we're saying, well, our 2 weeks are up. Bye. And she's like, no, these guys can't leave. So they gave us another 2 weeks.
And they have to pay you by the week, right?
They had made a nice deal for a 2-week deal.
Yeah.
So then they had to copy that same deal.
Ugh.
And then she's like, I want them 2 more weeks. So it kept going on all during filming. She had us come to the set and sit in her trailer and go, do something crazy with this scene. Or I wanted to get Marie McCormick. What cameo can we do for her? So we write a bunch of cameos. She ends up not doing any of them. But things like that.
And you helped get RuPaul in the movie is because of you.
It was totally my idea. Again, back at the Revolver.
Right.
I guess I spent a lot of time.
A lot of magic happened at the Revolver.
It did. They should like give me a free,
Right. There should be a booth or a bar with.
There should be a bar still with my name on it with
Yeah.
a martini there, and they should, they take those TMZ buses. I think they should stop there.
Yeah.
And show when I was there having a martini, and up came Supermodel.
Right.
A new song. Nobody had heard of RuPaul. Nobody knew. And they were like premiering the song. And my head just went like, who the fuck is that? And we were in the middle of casting it. And I was pushing for like Jennifer Lewis or, like a Sheryl Lee Ralph. Even then I was just like, let's bring someone diverse in there. There's all these white Brady people.
Yeah.
And then I went, wait a minute. And so I didn't go to like payphone or anything, or my car probably had one of those huge phones that was, remember like in the Brady Bunch?
Yeah. You write about Pia Zadora having an early cell phone that was like the size of a briefcase.
Yes.
Yeah.
She had to put it on the
table.
So we all knew how rich she was. I said, maybe I should wait till the next morning to see if the idea really stuck. And I woke up and I was like, that's a really interesting idea. And I went to work the next day and I told Betty and Jim, I said, I saw this video. Let's see if casting can get a copy of it. Would anybody go for it? I think it could be really out there. Of course, like nobody put any drag artist in a movie.
Right. And RuPaul wasn't a famous person yet, really.
Nobody. Like nobody.
Yeah.
So then they cast him. I said to Betty, let me know the day you're shooting it. I want to be on set because it was my idea.
Right.
And I came to set and met Rue. And at the end of the scene, I just whispered to Betty, just have him say, and girl, you better work. And Betty's like, why? And I'm just like, just put it one take, just get it in there. And I'm glad because then the song exploded, became just popular,
right.
To everybody, not just the LGBTQ audience. And Betty used that take and then underscored it with RuPaul's song.
Love it. So,
yes. RuPaul still doesn't acknowledge who I am every time I meet him.
Really?
I go, hi, I'm Stan Zimmerman. It was my idea to put you in the movie. I'm like, okay.
Right.
Yeah, I know. I should be a guest.
You should be a guest judge on one of those many iterations of that.
I say, sure, Jan. I would do like, drag race, Helsinki. I'll go there.
So of all the bold names on your resume that everyone knows and loves, Roseanne, Brady's, Gilmore Girls, Golden Girls, the best experience for you is the Brady stuff.
I think because they acknowledged what we brought to the table. They really celebrated it and got our weird sense of, well, like you love, pop culture. There's something like pop culture just gets us off. And it was all those things that we could make fun of politics and where the world was back then, but also bring up all the different things of what the world, where we came from the original Brady Bunch movie.
Right.
And they acknowledged us and celebrated us, even though on the first movie, we ultimately didn't get our name on the credits because of some stupid old Writers Guild law. And even though the producers of the movie petitioned for us to get it, it just didn't
work out. Was that devastating?
Well, devastating to my bank account because I got nothing. But more than that, it was
because you finally felt like, I finally feel like I am being acknowledged for what I'm contributing. Oh, but
again,
I know. Like I could see being an aspiring writer and you're like, a 20-year-old picking up your book and being and finishing it and being like, maybe not. Maybe I'm going to be a lawyer.
No.
What do young people?
I don't want people to get that.
What do people say to you? Because the ups and downs are many, and you document them really well. But you feel it.
Perseverance. If it's really something you love, keep doing it.
Right.
Find other ways to be creative. If sitcoms are dying, write a movie. If movie's not happening, write a play. Now you can do web series, podcasts. You can do anything.
Right.
What gets you excited creatively? It was difficult in watching that first screening at Paramount. And everybody's laughing at every single joke we put in there throughout the movie. No name. You see, dog trainer, bartender. They're all listed.
Oh my God.
Like, just put our names at the end. Like, why couldn't she put special thanks to or something? In the olden days, they used to put additional dialogue. Like, I think that is what the Writers Guild should do, but I'm not really in a position to petition them.
But you were back for the sequel, and you did get your names on that. A very Brady sequel. How was that experience? Was it similar to the first?
Betty wasn't the director. It was Arlene Sanford, who was really wonderful, but it wasn't Betty Thomas. And so we missed her. We were excited to do another one, but then at the same time, we got our first pilot, which also was a Paramount project at Fox. So we were like, what do we do? Like, we have a Go movie and we have a Go pilot. We could not physically do both. And, you know, like television, if you get a show on, it can go on for years and years and years. So we told them, is it okay if we step away, get other writers to keep writing stuff? We'll come back after we do the pilot. And that's what we did.
All right. And so it worked out.
Yeah.
And did the pilot ended up it didn't get picked up. It didn't get picked up.
It was Sean Astin, Elaine Hendricks from The Parent Trap. Nathan and Finero from Golden Girls ended up being our showrunners on it. So that was really another one of my full circle moments, to be able to sit with them, you know, while we were working on the script and getting notes and just hanging out in their offices at Paramount and hearing all the things that they would talk about us when we were not in the room on Golden Girls. So we didn't know any of this. We didn't know why we were not brought back for years. And so to hear their perspective was so great, and realizing it wasn't our writing, it wasn't us, it was Stupid Office Politics and Whit Thomas, and that those two guys in the writing staff really wanted us back.
Right.
So there was it did feel good to hear that, and I needed to hear that, you know, for my own self-worth.
Yeah. Was there a time when you ever thought, I'm going to pack it up and do something else? Or did you always just hang in?
I always hung in because I always had all these creative ideas. There was just one moment, and it was documented in the book, when Jim and I were just so sick of the nose, and we were being a little over dramatic, but we were probably stoned at the time, but on pot, which is legal,
right.
Not at the time, but I think we were driving down PCH and we pulled over, and I think I jokingly said, let's just wait till Boulder comes down and like hits us and like puts an end to this like dream of ours. Like, it's enough already. Like, just, you know, knocking on doors.
I've had thoughts like that. Yeah.
And then we got a call that Lifetime wanted to make Rita Rocks as a pilot. And we're like, okay, no Boulder, hurry up.
Hurry up. We got to get to Paramount. Like, I know it still has the allure. It still has the glamour and the fun part that we all loved as kids. And that comes across in your book as well. Stan, I'm looking at my notes, and I have so many more things that I want to ask you about. So this is going to be a two-parter. So we're going to wrap up the first episode right here, and then we're going to come back with lots more stories about Roseanne and Pauly Shore and all kinds of things that you work with. We might get a little emotional, I have a feeling. We're going to
have some theme music.
We'll do some treacly little music, and then we'll catch you for part two.
Right.
Thanks again to Stan Zimmerman. That was part one of our conversation. We're going to have more next week, but you should still pick up his book now, The Girls from Golden to Gilmore. All right, so this happened. Okay, I mentioned that I have a dance agent previously, and so you're probably all wondering, how is that dance career going as a mature dancer? Well, here's how it's going. No, we had a little moment. Okay, here's what happened. I was checking my email, and I got an email saying that that there were auditioning dancers for the Rose Parade. And, they were having this call, and they were going to submit dancers from the agency to go to this call. Are you available to do it? And they had the dates listed, and I looked at the dates, and it's my busiest time when I'm hosting virtual game nights. And that's probably the biggest chunk of my income right now. So I was like, I don't know, but it would be kind of cool. It's a dream. I could say I danced in the Rose Parade. So I reached out to my agent and I said, hey, this is, around the busiest time of year, but I am definitely interested. What do you know about the gig? How, is it all day long? Like, what's going on? And so she wrote me back and she was like, I love your enthusiasm and your communication. This is more a physically demanding job. Basically, she was saying, yeah, the mature dancers, not so much for this one. But they sent it to me and I didn't make it up. I got the email in my inbox, but her subtext was basically, oh, that's so cute that you think that you could dance in the Rose Parade. So long story short, Rose Parade not happening this year for Hensley, But, she liked my enthusiasm and my communication, and that's not nothing. And so now I don't have to worry about juggling my schedule to be available for the Rose Parade, which would have probably been, let's face it, exhausting. All right. So that's enough for this week. We're going to have part 2 with Stan next week. Before I let you go, I want to give a shout out to Oscar Rosario for mixing the episodes. My theme music is by Mark Daniels for Placement Music. We'll catch you next time on Dennis Anyone. Bye.